secretly managed my period for years with homemade pads after my mom's public betrayal. Now I help others in Japan. I am 19 years old now, but my period started when I was 13. The first time I even learned what periods are was when I was 11. At that time, I had a pretty good relationship with my mother, and would openly talk about my concerns. Obviously, as a young kid who's never menstruated before, I had no clue truly what to expect or what it'll be like. I have always asked people like my mom or my doctor how you know when it has started. They've always just replied with, "You just know." Because of that, I felt paranoid, and looked for any kind of clue that it might be starting. One day when I was 12, I went to the bathroom, and started to panic when I noticed a very small red dot on the toilet paper. It was as small as could be, but since I didn't know really what to look out for, I was convinced that this was my period. It wasn't, but I really thought it was. Now, like I mentioned, I had a pretty good relationship with my mother at the time, so I told her almost right away. I felt embarrassed and awkward about it, but the important thing is that I still told her. But, that day, and the day that followed sort of marked the beginning of my distrust in my mother. After we talked for a while, she told me to go put a pad on. I felt embarrassed to wear one, since I sort of associated them with diapers or something. I told my mom to not tell my dad or brother, and she promised to keep it between us. Later that night, I could absolutely tell that my mother told my dad. He didn't directly say anything, but I could tell with how awkward he was acting. Looking back on this, I sort of understand. I mean, your daughter getting her period could be seen as a big deal, so it's only natural that my mother would tell my dad. But, the next day is when it got really bad. Since this was not my period, of course no blood was coming out, but my mother just assumed that it was going to be really light for my first one. Throughout the entire day, my mom would keep making these comments. She would jokingly call the pad I was wearing a diaper. She'd say things like, "Aw, it's like you're a baby wearing a diaper again." Maybe she meant well when she said that, but I was feeling embarrassed enough. When I got a bit upset and told her to stop, she said, "Oh boy, you're all pissy now since you're on your period." I hated that day, since I felt so humiliated and embarrassed. By the second half of the day, I sort of concluded that my period has in fact not started yet, and this was just a false alarm. But still, the damage was done for me. When I told my mom it was a false alarm, she said, "Oh, guess I have to delete my Facebook post now." I felt alarmed when she said that, and asked what she meant. She said that she posted on her Facebook about me starting my period. I started to freak out, since my mother was friends with a few of my teachers from school, and various strangers I don't know. She said it wasn't a big deal, since all girls go through it, and it's a beautiful thing. As time passed since that day, I have started to distrust my mother. Of course, there were many other factors other than the false period incident, but I won't get into all that here. I was out of the woods for now, but I knew that it was only a matter of time before I got my cycle for real. Finally, on one fateful day during summer break, I went to use the bathroom, and found quite a lot of spotting on my underwear. I began to panic, since there was no doubt what this was. This wasn't just a simple barely visible dot, this was large splotches of blood. I was scared, freaking out, and crying quite a bit. I spent the rest of that day watching YouTube videos all about periods and how to handle them. I grabbed the 12-pack of pads left over from the false alarm over a year prior, and wore one. Hours passed, and I knew I had to tell my mother. But, I remembered how it went last time, so I hesitated. I kept on hesitating and hesitating. I never ended up telling her. I couldn't bring myself to. I didn't want that feeling of shame again, especially since at that point, we had a much worse relationship with each other. So, I kept it a secret. Now, everyone's first period is different, but mine was extremely tame at the start. It really wasn't all too much, and because of that, I naively assumed that every single period of mine was going to be this way. As the day went on, hardly any blood was coming out, and, while I know this is gross, I thought that I only had to use one pad per period. So that way, I could use the 12-pack of pads I had, and it would last me a full year. Obviously I eventually found out how that wouldn't work. But, I had to find some solution. I was 13, so I obviously didn't know how to drive, and I wasn't allowed to go for walks by myself, so it's not like I could go to any stores and purchase products I needed. I debated asking my school nurse for products, but I didn't want the risk of her telling my mother. Eventually, I settled on toilet paper. I have to say that you should never use toilet paper as a replacement for proper period products, unless of course for an absolute emergency. It is incredibly uncomfortable, has higher change to produce an odor, and is generally unsafe, since it could lead to infection. But, I felt like I had no choice, so, I would make a large stack of toilet paper to use as a makeshift pad. It was unbearable sometimes, especially when I was at school, and would have to sit on those hard plastic chairs. When one was used, I would wrap it up and put it in my trash. After my period was over, I would throw all the trash away in the large bin outside when nobody was looking. That was my life for many years. I feel gross and ashamed to even be talking about this right now. Of course, at the age of 13, I was pretty naive when it came to my cycle. It took me a while to get used to it, and adapt when my flow would get slightly heavier. It may come as a shock to some people when I say this, but I have never once stained anything besides underwear. I'd say that my period is at around a medium to light flow, with it being a bit more light a few years ago. I was always careful about staining things with blood. I'd make an extra large toilet paper pad for when I would sleep. The moment I woke up, I quickly got up and made a dash to the bathroom. So, I've never had to deal with my clothing or bedsheets getting stains on them. I'm sure that nobody out there enjoys going through a period, but it has always been especially tiring for me. I hated the process of making all those toilet paper pads, going through that discomfort, and having to keep everything a secret. I can understand if people read this and believe that I was being very overdramatic. It's really difficult to explain my thoughts and feelings during those years. Part of me was doing this because I didn't want to go through that shame again. Part of me was doing this to prove to my mom that I can handle myself, and part of me felt like I was in too deep to back out now. And yes, keep in mind that I was a young teen. 13 to 14-year-olds are not exactly known for being the wisest. Another thing I'd have to do is lie whenever I'd see a doctor. Of course, when you see the doctor, they're gonna ask you when your last period was. My mom always insisted in staying in the room with me whenever I'd see a doctor, so I'd have to lie. I felt so guilty lying to a doctor, but it's what I felt like I needed to do. Though, there was a time I almost got caught. When I was maybe 14, I was being tested for scoliosis, and had to get an x-ray. When the doctor was looking at my x-ray, he asked me when my period started, to which I answered that it hasn't yet. The doctor looked confused, and said that it should have started around at least a year ago. My mom thought it was strange, but didn't put two and two together. As the years went by, and I kept my secret, I knew that the day was going to come where I would have to come clean. I mean, it would be concerning if my period just never showed up. It was just a few days away from my 16th birthday, and I felt a lot of stress, since I was told that I had to see the doctor in order to get a refill on some of my medication. That's all normal, but my mom mentioned that she wanted to talk to the doctor about my absent period. I started to freak out, since she mentioned doing certain medical procedures and things like blood tests. I didn't want them to do any unnecessary procedures or give me unnecessary medications. I knew that it was time to tell her, but I was terrified. I've been hiding this for almost 3 years. I've never told anybody, not even my friends. It was going to be very hard for me to come clean about it. The night before the appointment, I actually made a post here on Reddit explaining this exact story. It was on a different account that I've since deleted. I was asking for advice on what I should do, and I've got a variety of responses. One common thing that people said was that my mom likely already knew, and was just waiting for me to fess up. I can promise you that my mother had no idea. She was convinced the entire time that it just hasn't started yet. Even if she did know, she definitely wouldn't have just stayed quiet about it. The next day came, and I got in the car, ready for my mom to drive me to school. I knew I had to do it right then. It was the most difficult thing for me to bring up. I started off by saying I was nervous for the appointment. I eventually worked up to saying that I have a secret, but if I told her, she would hate me. She naturally got very concerned, and questioned if my period just started for the first time like a few days ago. Now, I know that I could have lied and said that my period just started a few days ago, but I didn't want to. I wanted her to know that I've been doing this on my own for almost 3 years, and that I didn't need her help. I simply told her no. For 3 years. At that moment, she instantly brought the car to a stop on the side of a neighborhood road. She was obviously very shocked. Never in my life has my mom laid her hands on me, but I saw in that moment as she raised her hand up, like she was going to smack me. She never brought down her hand on me, but I have never seen her so enraged. There was lots of screaming, and lots of tears. I don't want to write down the details, since it's a difficult memory for me to revisit. In a way, I understood where she was coming from. She just found out that her daughter kept a secret this big for 3 years, and she was likely very worried about why I haven't gotten my period yet. Once she sort of calmed down, she asked me why I would do this. I told her the truth. I said that I didn't trust her, and that I could handle myself. That made her start screaming again. I was late to school at this point, but that was the least of my concerns. Eventually, she drove the rest of the way to school. She told me that today, she was going to get me period products. When she mentioned getting pads, I instantly shot that down. In my mind, I knew that if she got me pads, I'd need to repeatedly ask her to buy me more once I've ran out, which is not something I felt willing to do. I told her that I would rather have period underwear, since that's something I could wash on my own. Surprisingly, she agreed. It was awkward going to school that day, since my eyes were all red and puffy from crying. After school, I still had to go to the doctor's appointment, but the topic of periods never came up. While that day was very rough for me, it sort of felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. It wasn't a secret anymore. I thought that maybe after I get past this awkward phase, things will be easier, since I'll finally have proper products. But, I couldn't be more wrong. I got the period underwear, specifically 2 pairs of them. That's obviously not enough to last a full 6 to 7 days. I begged my mom to allow me to be the one to wash them, but she refused. She said that she was going to be the one to take them and wash them, which felt humiliating to me. I didn't want her to see any blood that came from my period. So, I just went back to using toilet paper. I would still wear the period underwear when I felt my period was about to start, or it's almost ended. This led to an argument where my mom would question me on why there are no new blood stains on the underwear, and me responding why she's even inspecting them in the first place. I felt like I was back to square one. The only difference now is that I had to deal with my mother asking me once a month for the underwear, so she could wash it. She would ask for it in a very loud voice, loud enough to where my dad and brother could easily hear. I seriously couldn't stand the toilet paper pads anymore. I felt so ashamed to still be doing it, especially when I was a senior in high school. When I was 18, I made the best decision of my life regarding my period, and got a menstrual cup. It took months upon months to even learn how to get it inside, since I've never even used a tampon before. And even more time to get the hang of it. But, it has been such a nice relief. Nowadays, that's what I always use. I don't have to deal with the feeling of blood coming out of me anymore, and most of all, I didn't have to deal with the discomfort. Getting it was difficult. I was not allowed to be anywhere on my own except for the mall, since my mom was worried about my safety. But, I snuck out of the mall one day and headed to Target, where I got the cup. The struggle after that was figuring out how to sterilize it, since it often needs to be boiled before using it the first time. It took many months before I was home alone for just long enough for me to do it. After that, and of course the whole learning curve, that cup is now my best friend, and I haven't made one of those damn toilet paper pads since. Life is much better for me right now, and I can handle things on my own. I moved out of my parents' house a few months ago, and currently live in Japan, so I don't have to deal with my mother anymore. This whole story was incredibly long, and if you've read this far, thank you. I know that this story sounds ridiculous and immature. I wish so much that periods weren't this thing to be embarrassed and ashamed over. Nobody should feel that way, but I unfortunately did, all because of a mother that made me feel like I needed to be shamed. As long as this story was, I couldn't fit every single detail inside, but just keep in mind that there were many other factors that lead to my distrust in my mother. This story may not sound like some huge deal, but it was for me. To answer some questions that you may have, no, I am not religious, nor is my family religious. Both me and my mother are atheists, so that didn't contribute to this. No, I didn't tell anybody about this while it was still a secret. I was and still am very close to my father, but I wouldn't be comfortable with telling him about such a thing. And yes, I understand that I may have been acting very immature and overdramatic in the past. Trust me, I do not feel proud about this. But, it's all in the past now. As ashamed as I feel about this part of my life, if I had the opportunity to go back in time and just tell my mother my period started the day it actually started, I don't know if I would take it. Life got arguably harder after she knew, and not just because she felt betrayed by me. I feel jealous of people who are close with their mothers, and have no issue talking about things like puberty and menstruation. Update 1. Wow, I can't believe how much this post has resonated with people. There are so many of you with similar stories, and reading your responses made me realize I'm definitely not alone in the awkward, complicated world of parental period management. But it's been a while since I updated, so much so that honestly, it almost feels like a fever dream looking back. But the last year has brought a, surprisingly realistic, whirlwind of new challenges, and moments of peace, that I feel like are worth sharing for anyone else out there negotiating their relationship with their parents, biology, and adulthood all at once. I'm in Japan now, living alone, away from my mother, my dad, and the culture of secrecy that I grew up marinated in. I'm going to language school, making steady progress, and for the first time, I set up an OB/GYN visit completely by myself. Let me just say, Japanese clinics are so different from the little family doctor's office I grew up with. It turns out, the average doctor here does not have the time, or the patience, for your family's drama. For once in my life, talking about my period just felt normal. There wasn't an endless series of questions. The nurse handed me a form and a little bottle of water, and that was that. I tried my best, in muddling Japanese, to explain that I'd been using a menstrual cup, and instead of any sort of weird look or scandalized questions, the doctor nodded, grunted cup you, and moved on. I nearly cried with relief, honestly. This little taste of anonymity launched me into an unexpected spree, with nobody monitoring my purchases, nobody inspecting leftover cups or laundry. I realized just how much energy I had spent on being secretive, on crafting elaborate excuses, energy now available for, well, better things. Like obsessively researching the best bento recipes, or going on obsessive walks around Shibuya to take photos of cats I'll never pet. But here's where things got unexpectedly wild. About 2 months after I moved out, I got slammed by the universe's favorite trick for a young, independent woman: extreme period pain. I mean, I'd always dealt with some cramps, but nothing like this. We're talking crumpled on my apartment floor, texting my only friend in the city in broken Japanese for Tylenol, wondering if this is the day I discover I have some rare, undiagnosed uterus disease level of pain. I didn't have a heating pad, I didn't even have those Japanese warming patches. I ended up emptying out my tiny rice cooker, cleaning it thoroughly, filling it with hot water, and shoving it under my hoodie as a makeshift heating pad. I Skyped my dad in a pain haze, and for the first time ever, I told him outright I was on my period and needed advice. He was weird about it for maybe a split second, then his engineer brain kicked in and he was sending me Amazon Japan links for every heating product known to man, plus those period comfort snacks he found by Googling. Let me just say, red bean mochi? Absolute miracle food. In all this, it was like confronting for real what happens when you don't have to be cagey anymore. I could text my friend here and say, "Sorry, can we reschedule? I have hell cramps," and she wouldn't flinch. In fact, she dropped a care package at my door. Instant ramen, a fluffy blanket, and a single-use Japanese heating patch. For hours, all I could do was marvel at the kind of community you can build if you let yourself need it. But then, because life is never just about healing, my mother sent me a massive care package from home. At first, I was grateful, until I popped the lid and found, I swear I'm not making this up, a 48-pack of jumbo pads, 4 pairs of period underwear, and a package of those weird discreet feminine wipes. Nestled underneath was a sticky note with a smiley face and a single line, "Thinking of you." Zero reference to the old drama, of course. The package was addressed to my strong girl. I stared at it for a while. If this had happened 2 years ago, I think I would have melted into rage, embarrassment, and shame. But now, looking at it, in my tiny Tokyo apartment, I just felt wistful, maybe a little annoyed, but mostly like I was reading the last page of a book that doesn't quite know how to end. I ended up messaging her a thank you, and I explained that I actually use a cup now, so the pads would probably go to friends or the women's shelter donation bin down the street. She replied with a single thumbs up emoji and changed the topic to cherry blossoms. We still have our drama, but there's a sense, maybe naive, but persistently growing, that this part at least can stay in the past. Here's where things got way more interesting. My period story, which for years was a source of dread, actually helped me make friends here. One night, during a post-karaoke izakaya hang, one of my classmates made a little offhanded joke about being late to class thanks to the red demon. Everyone laughed. I almost didn't say anything, old habits die hard, but then I just casually mentioned, "You haven't lived until you've had to DIY pads from toilet paper for 3 years because you couldn't tell your mom." That story landed. We ended up swapping period horror stories over edamame and cheap beer for the next hour. Turns out, one of the girls had learned to fold emergency origami pads in summer camp, one of the guys had been the designated tampon buyer for his sisters until he graduated high school, and another girl confessed she used to throw away her bloodied period underwear rather than let her family see she'd started. In the end, we all agreed that, at least for this generation, the shame game isn't worth it, and we might as well share the survival hacks. I taught them how to discreetly sterilize a cup in a dorm kettle. They taught me to never trust the mystery vending machine sanitary packs in Shibuya. I've sent small donations of those pads my mom sent to a local shelter. Turns out, there are plenty of people who need them, and it felt honestly pretty healing to be able to help, even in a tiny way, other women who might be just as desperate for privacy and dignity as my younger self. A surprise twist. Last month, I sat in on a college club that advocates for period poverty relief and menstrual dignity. After some encouragement, I shared, in embarrassing, broken Japanese, my story. To my shock, nobody laughed. One of the club leaders asked if I'd be willing to help translate some resource materials for international students. Suddenly, this thing I used to hide has become a weird kind of badge, proof you survive, that you can help someone else survive and not feel alone. So, here's my update. I still don't have a close relationship with my mother. Some wounds heal slowly, others don't at all. But I'm learning that privacy can mean freedom, not shame, that buying a menstrual cup, or talking about a period, isn't actually a sign of rebellion or drama, but just what adults do. Every bad day, every family argument, every hour spent crafting toilet paper pads, it all shoved me, eventually, toward the kind of independence I used to only dream about. Update 2. Believe it or not, the story keeps getting more surreal, in the ordinary sort of way, if that makes sense. I'm still in Japan, now a second year at language school, and independence feels less like a reckless experiment and more like regular life. If there's a theme to this next chapter, it's realization, the kind that strikes quietly, usually when you're least expecting it. So, what's actually new? For starters, last autumn, one of my classmates, Tomomi, basically dragged me into volunteering for a period poverty initiative on campus. The group runs discreet supply pantries, stocked with pads, tampons, and, yes, even some menstrual cups. I never pictured myself quietly restocking dispensers in university bathrooms, refilling anonymous little boxes decorated with origami, then going out for convenience store karaage with the team afterward. But these small rituals started to feel, sort of powerful. There's something oddly comforting about folding little info slips in half, knowing some terrified exchange student might read them at 2 a.m., and maybe feel a little less mortified about whatever's going on in their own underwear. And here's the curveball I never anticipated. One of the upperclassmen recognized my voice. He'd read a translated snippet of my original story, my literal Reddit post, on the club's international website, which I guess had been anonymized and posted as a "don't do this, but it's normal to be weird about periods" teaching example. I nearly sank through the floor when he introduced me to a roomful of the club's execs as the secret period Reddit girl. But, embarrassing as it was, it made everyone relax around me. Suddenly, whenever they needed a foreign perspective on campaign flyers, or advice on what foreign freshmen might be too mortified to ask, I was the go-to person. I won't say I wish my years of secret DIY pads on the next generation, but hey, at least it gets you in the door somewhere. A few months ago, I got another care package from my mom. She keeps doing this, inexplicably, every few months, a box arrives, no tracking, just shows up in the Genkan with my name on it, and always includes way too many menstrual products. But this winter, folded among the pads was a letter. Not an email, or a text, an actual physical letter, in uneven cursive. If I made you feel like you couldn't trust me or your own body, I'm sorry. I wish I handled things better. I love you, let me know if you ever want to talk. And if you see anyone who needs these, please give them away. I didn't cry, but I sat on my futon for a long time staring at the page. Old wounds ache, but this was new. Here's something wild and slightly embarrassing. In December, I overslept after a club event and wound up crashing at my friend's apartment. Cue my first ever time having to explain to someone, face to face, hey, I got period blood on your sheets. The world didn't end. Tomomi and I just shrugged, ran everything through the wash, and she taught me how Japanese people use oxygen bleach for stains. It turned into a weirdly wholesome lesson in being gentle with yourself, and proof that all my years of shame about stains and secrecy hadn't done a thing to prepare me for the simple honesty of yeah, sometimes this happens. Thanks to the club, I wound up interviewed by a tiny student-run magazine about period taboos from abroad. They printed a quote of mine, right under a candid photo of me and a classmate pretending to duel with packets of heating pads. Some of us only learned to take care of ourselves because we had to keep secrets. It's better not to wait that long. The lead writer, Kana, texted me later, my little sister read this and told our mom she was buying tampons for the first time. She said you made it less scary. That simple text felt, for a moment, like the universe closing a loop I didn't know was still open. But the most unexpectedly meaningful thing happened in March, a tiny, totally ordinary moment. It was the end of exam week, I was at the convenience store with a friend, and she realized she'd started her period with no supplies. For the first time in my whole life, I just reached into my bag, which now always has a pad and a tampon, just in case, and handed her one. No ceremony, no secrecy, no awkwardness, normal, adult, not a relic of old panic. My heart pounded for reasons I didn't totally understand. This is how the world is supposed to work, silent, simple, and kind. So that's what's happened since last time. I got a formal apology from my mother, made peace with Japanese laundry systems, became accidentally famous in a student club, awkwardly washed bloodstains with friends, and, maybe most quietly important, learned that growing up is not about erasing awkward history, but giving it somewhere useful to land. I still have the menstrual cup, still avoid Facebook oversharers, still flinch a little at the sound of my mother's ringtone, but life is peaceful here. For the first time ever, I look at the toilet paper roll and smile, grateful it's just for noses now. Update 3. It's kind of surreal how many new twists life can throw at you after you hit what you think is your ending, isn't it? I honestly thought I'd close the weirdest chapter of my period drama saga when I moved out, conquered menstrual cup battles, and megazorded my little pile of independence here in Tokyo. But it's like the world, or maybe some universe-watching anime goddess, saw me finally relaxing and said, plot development time, albeit with less humiliation and more, well, growing up. So, here's the next part. Since my last post, things got even more unpredictable, in the kind of way I wouldn't have believed if you told me about it at 13. For one, after a full, blissful year of solo living and self-managed cycles, my apartment flooded. Not a little kitchen leak, a full-on, toilet overflow meets typhoon downspout disaster, the kind that forces you to evacuate at 8 a.m., still half asleep and wearing your only clean pair of comfy shorts. Suddenly I found myself shoving my most prized possessions, passport, manga, menstrual cup, yes, in that order, judge away, into a backpack and trudging off for a night with my classmate Yo-Yo and her host family. Now, as if crashing at someone else's house in Japan wasn't scary enough, the universe had to make it that week. My period landed exactly 12 hours after we dumped my wet bedding in the communal washing machine. Yo-Yo's host mom, who I barely know, knocked on the door carrying a towel and a giant basket of snacks, peered inside, and spotted my Ziploc bagged cup on top of my suitcase. Ah, you use cup, not a question. Next thing I know, she's bustling around boiling water, giving me a spare towel, in pink, naturally, and swapping home hacks for hard water and cup cleaning. We end up in a full Google Translate fueled marathon about everything from reusable pads to the best neighborhood places to buy modern period underwear. It was like a parallel universe from the one I grew up in, this normal, low-key acceptance. The next evening, her daughter, a year younger than me, usually super shy, came knocking, and whispered, "Can you help me explain cups to my friends at school?" She'd seen something online and worried it was gross. So, thank you, 13-year-old me, for surviving years of mortifying toilet paper origami, because now I'm here, giving demos in broken Japanese and acting like I've always been the chill expert. The host mom even pressed a new folding travel cup into my hand as a gift when I finally moved back home, like earning a weird, practical badge in a coming-of-age game. And my own mother? Oh boy, she still got her plotline. 2 months after my apartment flood fiasco, she decided to come visit, her first international trip ever. For a week, my carefully crafted world, and panic-bought drawers of period supplies, turned upside down. I braced myself for passive-aggressive pad comments or remember when you used to hide things speeches, but instead, we somehow slipped into this strange, awkward truce. She was actually the one who asked if, in Japan, people do things differently. It wasn't exactly a heart-to-heart, but I told her about student clubs, the shelter donations, my apartment mini-flood, and even my host family being so casual with their stuff. She didn't comment, just nodded, like she was sorting out years of her own internal baggage. The second to last day, we ducked into my favorite con beanie because I'd run out of liners. The cup is a miracle, but never trust your energy on day 2, and she just, let me grab what I needed. No instructions, no fuss, no weirdness at checkout. That was a new chapter. We walked back under blooming sakura and it hit me, her handling periods used to feel like proof of my failure to be grown up, and now, she's just a tired visitor in a land she doesn't understand, quietly letting me fill my own basket. But honestly, the most crazy moment was unintentionally becoming a sort of informal mentor for other international students in Tokyo struggling with their own secret period habits. It started small. One girl from Malaysia DM'd me through the campus messaging system, asking if menstrual cups were weird for Asian women. Her words. I met her for coffee, told her my saga, and we ended up starting a little period check-in group chat. Word spread. Soon, I was troubleshooting period stains, tracking down a lost cup in a dorm trash room, don't ask, and even helping someone mail request pads from home during a family lockdown. We laughed it off as a super secret, totally adult club. Somehow, adolescence comes for us all, no matter where we're from. And, I started to realize, all those shameful solo years, those low-key survival skills, mean I can spot a girl awkwardly scanning the hygiene aisle at 9 p.m., biting her lip and contemplating cheap toilet paper, a mile away. Sometimes all it takes is a smile and a need help to open up the world she thought she had to manage alone. There's a kind of magic in the shared knowledge, a thread connecting me to total strangers, and younger versions of myself. I think, more than anything, growing up has been learning that most of us are still making it up as we go. My mother is softer with me now, in a very subtle, roundabout way, maybe from seeing me take care of myself, maybe out of guilt, maybe just time and distance. Her care packages keep arriving, but now they're half snacks, half just-in-case supplies, no guilt-tripping notes attached. She asks how my Red Ninja Task Force project is going, her new nickname for my volunteer work, and I don't even cringe. Sometimes we even talk about stain hacks and travel cramps, and I realize, oddly, we're beginning to have the relationship I dreamed of at 13, except on my terms, from another continent. There's still fallout, of course, old anxieties, sudden shame when I can't find supplies right away, the muscle memory of hiding evidence. But bit by bit, I'm dismantling that fortress. My cycle is regular now, I book my own appointments, buy what I need, share what I have, and, who would have guessed, sometimes miss my mother, instead of wishing I could disappear. So, if there's a next update moral, it's this: your big, shameful secret can become someone else's comfort. My disaster years are slowly transforming into a toolkit, one that's less about survival, more about sharing. Sometimes the wild stuff isn't a big revelation, but the small rituals, a friend handing you a pad, a stranger letting you crash on her floor, your mother letting you fill your basket without a single word. And, maybe most healing of all, looking back on who you were, and realizing you wouldn't change a thing. Not because it was painless, but because now, you finally know you're not alone.